All right, top 10 free agent signings. I want to be clear in what I'm doing here. I am not doing just the top 10 players that went to a different team, right? What I'm factoring in is how much they got paid, and I think how good of a contract it is. So that's kind of the biggest thing. It's kind of biggest steals in free agency might be the way to view it, more so than just like the best players. Although, again, I am taking into account how good the players are and how good the fit is. So, yeah, let's just jump into it. Starting off with number 10. Bit of a weird one here at number 10. I'm going Bobby Wagner. Again, yes, it doesn't really make a ton of sense for this to end up, with the Commanders. I don't really fully get that. I don't get why Bobby Wagner went there and kind of agreed to this. I guess he likes Dan Quinn, wants to play in that scheme. I guess that makes sense. But I just think it's, he's a good player still. Maybe he's not what he once was, but is still a good player. And for a very reasonable contract of, $7.5 million, a lot of worse contracts are getting handed out right here. So not exactly league shattering, but yeah, really good contract, I think. Number 9 is technically a two-parter, and one of these is a trade, so saying it's a signing isn't really fair, but I'm gonna throw them together. The Fields and Russ moves by the Steelers, obviously Wilson being a signing, Fields being a trade, but not giving up much. I just think it's smart. Like, I always kind of say for quarterback needy teams, don't neglect the position. You got to put resources into it, but you don't necessarily want to do a big trade up to try and get try to draft a guy if you don't have a great pick. They made the playoffs, so don't have a great pick. But going out, adding two options, which is also something I always kind of pound the table for, have a plan B if you don't love your plan A. It's just smart. It's understanding their situation and pumping resources without breaking the bank. Didn't have to put a ton of resources into either of these guys. So, yeah, really smart stuff by the Steelers. Next up, I'm going with Gino Stone, who was of the Ravens, now going to the Cincinnati Bengals, who's kind of just been a really good, solid, good safety for the Ravens for 2 years now. Now 2 years, 2 years ago, he didn't play a ton. Last year, he had 1,000 snaps on the nose, exactly 1,000 snaps, and played well for them. Was a good safety, and for just a $7 million deal for 2 years, this is a really, I think, good value signing for a team that could definitely use a safety on top of it. So, yeah, kind of a real underrated move that didn't get talked about a ton, but I think a really smart one. So this is number 8, and hey, I don't know, getting a guy who's played for a division rival, knows how they work, maybe there's some added value there as well. As for number 7, I'm sticking with the Ravens, but now instead of a player leaving the Ravens, a player leaving to the Ravens, Derrick Henry, who, this is another move I like a lot. I think it is good value with the only paying $8 million a year for the 2 years, and only $9 million of it is guaranteed. So definitely giving yourself a pretty good situation in terms of you can get out of this contract if you have to. It's just good value. Again, yes, Derrick Henry's a great player. If I'm ranking players, he might be higher than just number 7, but the contract itself is also still really good and deserves to be here, and I'm really excited to see how that works out together. Number 6, going with sticking with Cincinnati in a sense, it did Gino Stone, who Cincinnati signed, is now a former Bengal, now Detroit Lion player, DJ Reader, who's for just a 2-year, $11 million on average deal, and only $7 million of this is guaranteed. For a guy who has pretty consistently been like a 500 to 700 snap, great run stuffing interior defensive lineman. Usually, like, bad run stuffing defensive linemen get this kind of contract. So, like, a great one getting this kind of contract is a steal for Detroit, and it's a perfect fit. This is exactly what they needed to address, was defense. I guess I would say, like, pass defense was a bit more important than run defense for them. Their run defense was already pretty good, but, like, can always get better there. So I think this is a really smart move, and I'm a big fan of it. Number 5, one of the more talked about signings, but I do think for a good reason, Marquise Brown going to the Chiefs. Feels like this is kind of one of those, Marquise Brown knows he's maybe leaving some money on the table, going for a 1-year, $13 million deal for Kansas City, but I think it's kind of him betting on himself a little bit, expecting to get a big-time payday maybe after this season, whether that's with Kansas City or elsewhere, and I think for the Chiefs, like, listen, I don't think Marquise Brown is a number one wide receiver. I think that, teams have tried to put him in that role. I just don't think that's where he's really thrived. But here, he might not even be the number two receiver on a lot of plays. They have Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. Kelce's their number one wide receiver. I don't care if he's tight end. He's their number one wide receiver. And then it's Rice and Brown competing for the 2 and 3 spot. And the way the Chiefs run their offense, kind of interchangeable, really. He's going to really help them out a lot. And for something that was at times a weakness last year, the receiving core could be a big strength because of just a $13 million move. That's pretty good. Number 4, I'm going Kendall Fuller, cornerback formerly of the Washington Commanders, now of the Miami Dolphins, a guy who has really been a position that basically no one is consistently good at. Kendall Fuller has been consistently good at the cornerback position for a few years now. So, 29 years old, and again, 2 years at just $15 million total. When I first read it, I thought, okay, there's clearly a mistake. It's $15 million a year, right? That's what it is. And even if it was $15 million a year, I wouldn't have hated it for Miami, because getting a solid, is he a number one corner? I don't know. But listen, the situation he was in last year, the fact that he still put together a good season, he's had over 1,000 snaps each of the past several seasons. I don't know. I think he's a really good player. And for Miami, who I think could use another corner, the Xavier Howard thing, it just, he hasn't reached his, hasn't gone back to being Xavier Howard. So moving off of that, adding Kendall Fuller to a really reasonable deal, getting a starting corner that you can trust for $7.5 million, he should be worth 3 times that, at least, in my opinion. I think corners are incredibly undervalued. This is one of the better signings of free agency, which is why it's high up on my list. Number 3 is Tyron Smith, who, could make a lot more in incentives, but hey, incentives, usually you're glad to pay those, and going to the Jets, which they desperately needed a tackle, getting a elite caliber tackle for a really reasonable deal. It's only 1 year, but they're trying to win a Super Bowl right now. Their goal is this year. That's what they're paying attention to. That's what they should be paying attention to. Obviously, they got to protect Rodgers, and for Smith, this is it seems like a great fit. He should be a great player for them. Definitely one that I'm very impressed with. Next up, number 2 on my list, I'm going Patrick Queen. So another Steelers move makes this list. Their quarterback situation made the list. Now Queen makes the list as well. Signs, was a linebacker for the Ravens. Now signs a 3-year, $13 million, actually closer to $14 million a year deal. But only, $20 million of that total deal is guaranteed. So only about half of it. Patrick Queen has been a really for the past couple of years, a consistently really good linebacker, and I always kind of feel like he's actually better than people give him credit for. I keep hearing Roquan Smith makes him look good. How? I watched the tape. I don't see that. Again, it's the whole Levante David, Devin White thing that people bring up of Levante David kind of freed up Devin White to only have to rush the passer and only have to kind of be a free player there and kind of just try to blow things up instead of having to do the things like play man coverage and play zone coverage and drop back and that kind of stuff. Queen does all that stuff. Queen does every aspect well. It's not Queen only does certain aspects well, and having Roquan Smith do the harder stuff frees Queen up to do the easier stuff. Queen does the hard stuff just as often as Roquan did in that scheme. So I don't they make each other look better. It does help having Roquan, sure, but that's just football in general. It helps to have talented players around him. I think he's really good. I think a player like his caliber usually would go for around $20 million. I'm surprised the league doesn't view Queen the way I do. Maybe I'm just delusional, but I think it's a great move. And, it's a position of need. The Steelers are trying to be competitive. Yeah, a big fan of this move. Number 1, I am going with, listen, I know this is technically not a free agent signing, but it's essentially the spirit of a free agency signing, right? It kind of came down to, you're going to have to pay a big contract as well as trade for someone like Sneed. No one was going to trade for him unless you had a long-term deal worked out, because he wasn't going to play on the tag. So I'm going to throw it on there. Is it cheating? Sure, but it's my list, whatever. Trading for Sneed, I think was a great move by the Titans. I really do. Getting in, again, an elite caliber corner, which is what Sneed has been over the course of his career. Think about what they ask of him. I know some of his advanced metrics are a little bit lower than someone like Fuller's, but that's because they ask so much of a guy like Sneed. They really do. They ask him to do so many things, and his advanced metrics are still really good, especially considering how often he's one-on-one and things like that. For the Titans, I do think that they wanted to address the cornerback position with adding Awuzie as well, and I think that for under $20 million a year for an elite caliber corner, like who's consistently been good and is just 27 years old, is like an awesome deal. And they only had to give up a 3rd-round pick to do it as well. That's my favorite move so far. Again, not to say necessarily that there aren't like better additions, but like, listen, if you needed a safety, you went out and you paid the correct market value for that safety. That's a great move. It's not not how I'm evaluating this list. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below why you think I'm dumb. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.